Alright, Tinfoil Gang, it's that time again. Episode 4 of Season 3 is on the books, and this one's called There and Back Again. As you might expect, this video is riddled with spoilers, so if you like to avoid that, now's the time to put this video on hold and come back when you're ready. Also, a quick shout out to the channel patrons. These lovely individuals you see here, thank you so much for your support. You can check for the relevant links to this and the free Discord in the description. So this episode deals with the immediate events following the return of Tabitha to Fromville. Tabby is coming home, kids, and she's bringing a special guest. Much like the previous 3 episodes, this episode delivers some interesting backstory and a few clues that help us make some sense of the nature of this mystery box. Now there's a lot to discuss, so I hope you've got that tinfoil tight because it's time to dive. So things start off with Ethan getting a call from the monsters. It's the one that keeps acting like it's Thomas, and it warns him that Tabitha is inbound and that he needs to be brave and help her. No doubt this is a ploy to get him out of the house and into some trouble at night. Quick side note though, the director draws our attention here to the kids drawing again at the beginning of this scene. And at the time of writing this, I can't say for sure if these are new images, but they are very interesting. First one shows what looks like 3 little girls standing in a field. Now this part is purely speculation. Those circular shapes appear to be flowers. And I'm thinking they look a little bit like poppies. And yes, some poppies are brightly colored in the center. Poppies also happen to be symbols of death and remembrance, which would be kind of fitting. But we also can't forget to mention this shadowy figure in black who's off to the side here. Who is this supposed to be? Is this the same shadowy figure we see in other drawings? Now, it's the second image that really gets me. It shows 2 people sitting under a structure that looks kind of like a tent. There are also these column-like shapes that appear to be torches or have torches on them. Now, I can't make a direct comparison between this and any real place we've seen so far, other than that weird structure back at the log cabins. This is from the scene where Jade and Dale grabbed those rods from this structure to save Christy from the bear trap. Could this be the same place? And who are the people inside of it? I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like a man and a woman here. So Fromville is at it again, and it manages to snare another group of victims with the old tree in the middle of the road bit. Works every time. You know it had to be frustrating to be Tabitha at this point. She knows she's being forced right back into the ditch she barely crawled out of, with very little in the way of obvious concrete answers on how to truly escape this place. Tabitha tries her best to convince them to stay on the road until they reach town, but they just think she's a crazy person and mostly ignore her warnings. The question you might have at this point though is, why did this happen in the first place? How did she end up going back to Fromville? If the boy in white showed her the way out, how did she end up back here again? It seems that it would only make sense if the boy in white was either trying to get her to bring back Pops or show her something on the outside that she could use later. Perhaps there really are 2 opposing forces at play here. Maybe the boy in white is trying to help her escape, but the evil in Fromville has its hooks in her, so she's pulled back in despite her best efforts. Okay, so we gotta talk about Fatima. Marielle and Fatima have a scene together where Fatima is once again being reassured that everything is just fine. It's just a minor complication, nothing to worry about. She just got a nutrition issue according to Marielle, but we know that this isn't even the half of it. Now, a few days ago, while I was on the internets, I ran across a Reddit post with a super spicy take. The theory was posted by Pack Apprehensive 1992, and it posits that Fatima isn't pregnant at all. She's actually in the middle of the process of transforming into one of the monsters. Now, this seems like a wild take at first glance, but it makes a lot of sense when you take into consideration all of the context clues, especially after watching this particular episode's ending. Pack Apprehensive 1992 is onto something here. The fact that Fatima doesn't drink water is another alleged clue that she's turning into a monster. The reason why the monsters are all dried up and desiccated inside might be because they just don't intake any water. They're dried out. If this turns out to be true, there are plenty of options for where this could go, even though it would be a bummer to watch another one of the good ones bite the dust. 3 seasons in, and I've learned not to get attached to anyone on this show. Moving on to Victor and Sarah. So these 2 are kind of doing their own thing while everyone else deals with the madness. Victor is ready to build that fort and tell his story. Of course, we learned that what he means to do is to try to remember what happened prior to the day that everyone in town was erased by Christopher, and he needs a safe space to do that in. I keep forgetting this happened so long ago that he couldn't possibly remember it all. He was a kid. So the whole fort thing is probably to make himself feel safe while he digs into the old memory bank of nightmares, and he chose Sarah because she's the scariest person he knows. His words, i.e. she's tough enough to handle it that. I think that's what he's trying to say. So Victor gives us a rundown of events, but with a few interesting details. One of those is that he claims to have seen the boy in white for the first time after the massacre took place. He also tells us that the boy in white told him to gather up the keepsakes of the departed and bury them rather than bury the bodies. Through this scene, we learn about a few characters from the past, but the most important thing to take away from this is that Christopher was a friend and an overall decent dude, but he went bad after he started seeing the symbols everywhere, just like Jade. Is Jade the new Christopher? Let's hope not. So Boyd and Randall are on the coach bus, getting on each other's nerves. Boyd wants to know why Randall is even there, and he's told it's because Randall wants to be a part of any effort to leave this place because the things he saw in his nightmare state are worse than death. Okay. I really want to know what they saw. So yeah, it's understandable. He's trying to get up out of here. So during this exchange, Randall drops some more knowledge on us by cluing us into the fact that the monsters don't always act like monsters. When these monsters come out at night, they seem to follow patterned behaviors that appear to be normal things that people do. I think this is another hint that they were once real people, and perhaps their old habits still manifest this way. It makes me wonder if they have detailed memories of their lives before this. Goofus and Gallant continue their yapping, but they're interrupted by the arrival of an ambulance with Tabitha and Pops tucked away in it. So Boyd and company shifted into high gear. Kenny, Jade, and Christy are still away at the log cabin site. Christy's ankle is still no good, plus it's nighttime, so they're not doing anything. They're not going anywhere. This is the perfect opportunity for Kenny to have a heart-to-heart with both Christy and Jade, and Christy reminds him that he's not alone. He's got found family here, so he needn't worry. Even Jade gets in on the warm fuzzies. I gotta say, wholesome Jade is always invited to the party. I swear Jade is gonna be Mr. Rogers by the time this series is done and dusted. Unless, of course, he ends up being a mass murderer. Jade mentions that he's been seeing the symbol since the day he arrived in town while talking about Tian Chan with Kenny. I think we can expect to see Jade's condition deteriorate if Victor is right about Christopher and go on that murder spree, unless of course they find a way to stop that. So now back to the ambulance. So the monsters succeeded in taking out the two EMTs after tricking them into stopping in town. Apparently, these two dudes were no longer necessary. The police officer manages to get away and she runs to the colony house, but she's panicked and she's firing her pistol at multiple targets. And unfortunately, a stray catches a colony house resident named Nikki, who happened to be watching all of this from the colony house window. Now, poor Nikki, she is really unlucky. Or when Nikki caught a stray in the window, it might make you recall an earlier scene where Paata is giving Tilly grief for using the tarot cards after the whole thing with the crow crashing through the window. Now she's suggesting that these kind of activities might be inviting trouble. This is right after Nikki tells Paata to help her clean up the dead crow, but Paata refuses to touch it, thinking it must be bad luck. Was Paata right? Is this more than a coincidence? So anyway, after Nikki catches a bullet, Marielle is called to action again, and she's able to remove the bullet from Nikki, but unfortunately, Nikki's injuries were too much and she dies later. I kind of felt bad for the cop here because she was thrown into an unbelievable situation. It's way too crazy for anyone to believe any of this could actually happen. I don't think any amount of warnings would have stopped this, not to mention how freaked out a normal person would feel when faced with this scenario. You can't blame her for making mistakes. She's gonna be real popular around town, assuming she survives the night. So without going into every detail, despite the odds, Boyd and Jim are able to save Tabitha and Pops from the monsters, but not without a few kinks in their plan. At one point, the monsters are able to isolate Randall from the rest of the group with a little assist from his cicada hallucinations. Boyd wants to drive the ambulance away from the danger, but he doesn't have the key. But you know who does have the key? Yeah, the nurse monster. The same nurse monster that always walks up to the coach bus to taunt Randall every night is holding the keys to the ambulance. And she makes Boyd an offer. He can have the keys, but they get to keep Randall. I know some of y'all are like, bet I'll have those keys, thank you very much. Randall's not the most popular guy, but we know Boyd. We know that he did not want to make this trolley car of a decision, but he chose to save the lives of 3 people by peeling out of there and leaving a singular Randall to the monsters. Upon arriving at Colony House, the locals are shocked to see Tabitha back in town. They thought she escaped or died out there. That's gotta be depressing to see her back though. Boyd's in this scene too, and he loses it when he learns that the cop accidentally shot one of the townies. And he was about to do that thing he does where he makes you get up close and personal with the mistakes you've made, but he's pulled aside by Donna before he can follow through. So Donna is going through it, and it appears that tonight might be the last straw. She's got a huge responsibility in a highly unpredictable situation, and the stress is getting to her. I don't envy her, but I did think it was cool to have Boyd and Donna have a moment to take stock of everything and do a little venting away from the townies. And this is all they can do to keep from going off the deep end. We get another short scene between Elgin and Tilly, and it reveals what some of us have been speculating to be true. The kimono woman is trying to communicate with Elgin, maybe even lead him to something. She literally turns to him and says, "Help me, please." Help with what? And why Elgin? Unfortunately, the vision was interrupted, so we don't get to see where she was trying to take him. Okay, we're finally back with Victor and Sarah and the storytelling for it. So Victor opens the case up and pulls out a couple of the keepsake items that were stashed away, and he tells us a little bit about the person that they belong to, but he seems really bothered by the fact that Christopher's keepsake is not in the case. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention that Christopher is the owner of the ventriloquist dummy. You know, the one that screams at Jade in season 2 in that one shot in the living room? This little creep might actually be Christopher's keepsake. His name is Jasper, and that is the perfect name for this thing. Now that we know that Jasper is possessed or being controlled by the monsters, or at least it looks that way, who knows, maybe he actually is a monster himself, he's just different for some reason. Victor begins to recall his childhood memories of Christopher talking to Jasper in the church basement. Things get heated and Jasper lets out a shrill scream that sounds exactly like the ones the monsters usually belt out. Can we speculate that Jasper may have been what drove Christopher over the edge? Or maybe it just nudged him a bit, because this does not look healthy. All in all, Victor's memories are starting to come back, and I think this is good for Victor and the rest of the townies' chances. Boyd and Donna are trying to cut the tension with a drink when they're alerted to some commotion out in the front of the house. It's Randall, and he is splayed across the windshield of the ambulance, and he's not dead. Yikes. And of course, finally, we get that scene where Fatima is, you might say, sampling one of the bodies. That's the best way I can say it. That was really crazy. That was crazy. All right, Tinfoil Gang, I need to hear what your theories are about these drawings that Ethan was looking at the beginning of the episode. Also, I want to know what you guys think about Tabitha and why she ended up back in Fromville. And finally, what do you think is going on with Fatima? Is she going to become a monster, or is she just falling apart? Like, what's really going on with her? And do you think she actually is pregnant? I don't think she is. Anyway, that's a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you already know what to do. Thanks for sticking with me to the end if you made it this far. Much love to the patrons, the regulars, and the rest of the Tinfoil Gang. Be safe, be kind, and until next week, off you go.